What is organizational culture? Is there a definition that clearly explains what you need to know? And in order to influence culture, what should you measure? Can you measure culture? This is what we are talking about today on Complexity Cogitators. My name is Joakim from Prónay, and together with Marco Ahumada Juntunen, we try to make sense of organizational behavior. Marco, here we are again.
And we're back.
And we are back. Nice to see you. As I just said before, I had have a week or a week and a half of illness behind me, so it's nice to get some sort of intellectual stimulation again.
Oh, well, I'm happy to attempt to provide it.
Yes, lovely. And we did decide to talk about culture this time, or more so organizational culture in organizations. That's kind of the framing to the word culture here. And as we have agreed upon previously as well, we also said that we would bring 1, 2, or bring 3 things about the topic. So one quote or semi-quote, fake quote perhaps, about culture that I've quite often used in the past is culture is the conversation that happens at the coffee machine, or culture is the worst behavior you allow, or something to that extent. Like such quotes I've used quite often to kind of have a conversation about culture. So I would like to use those as maybe not starting points, but maybe to infuse those perspectives into our conversation and see where that takes us. Do you have 3 things about culture that you brought, or do you have 3 things on top of mind, or 1 or 2?
Well, there's the good old chestnut. Can you measure culture? And if you try, what is it that you get? If you want to throw in like a funny twist to it. Other than that, I've done some thinking on the topic before. I believe you've read something that I've written, and I've also written quite a bit that I didn't publish. So I think maybe we could touch upon that a little bit. I did some digging, like I like to do with my research. Try to find the earliest definition that I can find. So I could share some of that work if you're interested.
That's interesting.
But I'm also interested in collecting those things that you shared. I call them descriptor. Oh, the second point is you can't define culture.
But you can describe it.
Yes, exactly. So
So those are descriptors.
Yeah. So okay, so we finished. That's topic number 2, and we're open the shut.
Yeah, exactly. No, but I think I agree with that, because all my attempts at, or semi-attempts at, trying to understand what culture is and how to especially influence culture and create or design or whatever you want to do with culture in organizations, as sometimes that can be your task, in air quotes, as a consultant. It's incredibly hard to define what it is, and I believe I share that view that you can't define it, but you can describe it. And to me, the most important aspect of culture is that it is some sort of recurring behavioral patterns. Maybe not even patterns, but it is the behavior. It's how people generally behave in an organization. If you can draw some sort of generality from it. And now I realize that was an attempt at some sort of definition, but this is how I generally view it.
Yeah, and I would add to that only one thing, and that is that culture is both what generates the behaviors and what is generated by it. So in a way, culture perpetuates itself with the artifacts that it creates. So there's what are the things that make culture or these patterns repeat? Well, it is the things that we do. So it is that kind of system of influential loops over time.
Yeah, exactly. I kind of agree with that. But what was the earliest description or definition of culture that you found in your research?
I wish I had prepared this, so this is a good thing to.
But you can look that up. And I worked a lot with Edgar Schein's view on culture, and especially his 3 levels of organizational culture. Which is the I don't remember if I get the layers correct here now, but the observable behaviors, the cultural artifacts that you speak of, and the underlying espoused values. I think those 3 elements to view and understand culture has, at least to me in my work, has been quite useful, and it has helped to partly identify the things that you say that are produced by the culture, the cultural artifacts, the things that people do and gather around, and try to figure out what the significance of those artifacts are, or the significant is.
So, are you ready to hear the result of my research?
Yes.
I'm just gonna drop you more or less without context, but I did set out to try to find, like I did with strategy, try to set out to find a definition of it, because we talk about it in very different ways. So the first one, the oldest definition that I could find is from 1871 by anthropologist Edward B. Tyler. And he puts it this way: that complex whole, which includes knowledge, belief, art, morals, law, custom, and any other capabilities and habits acquired by man as a member of society. So, in this view, then, culture is an array of capabilities and habits that somehow are informed, rather, in this view, by society. And he also gives a few examples of the things that includes. So all the way from art to law and other capabilities.
But that's quite interesting. That's quite broad. But as he does say in the beginning, that complex whole, as in and encompassing everything. So essentially, it is what people do and why people do it.
Yeah,
is essentially included in that.
Yeah, which is interesting, but not very useful. How are you going to use that to work with culture? So, I like it nonetheless. It's pretty close to some of my thoughts on culture. But then I kept going, of course, and tried to find some influential definitions of culture. And the next one, and I'm going to butcher this name, Clifford Geertz, I don't know, from 1973. So it's a bit of a temporal jump here, right? So a system of inherited conceptions expressed in symbolic forms by means of which men communicate, perpetuate, and develop their knowledge about attitude toward life. So now we're in a philosophical register instead.
Mm-hmm.
That culture is the use of symbolic expression. So I interpret that as language, art, or practices, and then interestingly, that we use to collectively understand, shape, and share our existence. It's compared to the first one, this is a more active and dynamic view on culture. Is my sense of it, at least. The next one is from 1980 from I don't know exactly what profession, but this is another Geert, but not the same one. He puts it like this: the collective programming of the mind, which distinguishes the members of one group or category from others. So I like this one because now we're in identity, right? Culture as difference from others somehow, or the sameness that makes us different from something else.
Yeah, exactly. Now we're talking social identity theory and social psychology here, so that's quite interesting, and that's also quite useful,
right?
Group identity is incredibly useful in trying to understand, especially well, as I tended to in the beginning, behavior.
Mm-hmm. I have one last one in this list of definitions that or the most interesting definitions that I found, or my curated list of cultural definitions. And the last one goes, it's the set of shared, taken for granted, implicit assumptions that a group holds that determines how it perceives, thinks about, and reacts to its various environments.
Yeah, that sounds very similar to Edgar Schein's espoused values.
Yeah. So this one is more about beliefs and relation to the environment, shared beliefs.
But this is also, but it goes in line with espoused values as well, as if I remember correctly. Schein talks about those as having been established and created through the group overcoming severe hardship in the past together. That's how they create that belief and that underlying, well, espoused value of how things are done and how they think and how they approach difficult problems together as a group. So quite in line with that view. But in your when you created this curated list and when you have thought about culture before, well, what do you think? Like, where have you ended up landing on? What is Marco's view on culture?
I put it this way, a lot longer than the others because I wasn't that interested in keeping it concise. So it goes like this. Culture is the invisible fabric that holds together the way we collectively perceive and interact with the reality around us. The things we do, the things we say, the things we believe, the things we value, and so on. Culture is at the same time these manifestations and their cause. For instance, our practices are shaped by our beliefs and values, and in turn, these rituals reinforce and propagate these beliefs and values.
Interesting. And I kind of agree with that. But then to challenge you a bit, how useful is that?
It's not what I use it for, at least, if that makes it any more useful, is to be able to say that, well, culture is not just the things we do, and it's not only the things we create, but sort of what is happening between. What is it? What's the tension between the things we create and why we create them?
But I think the core question or the core challenge that I've come across in the past 10 plus years is how to influence. How do we influence culture? Because you and I both, we have worked a lot in organizations to try to do some sort of change or transformation. And this is always you must influence the culture, because it's, in the end, it's all about behavioral change. Even if you do what is so in the now, to do either an AI transformation or an ERP transformation or a CRM transformation, where you just exchange a system and you call it transformation, and you forget the fact that even if you only replace a system, you are expecting behavioral change in the end, because you're supposed to do things in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
And when you expect or not expect, any transformation still requires behavioral change. And when behavioral change is the point, is the purpose or the goal of it, then you will have to come face to face with the culture, even if you're just replacing a core system in a technology organization. There will be culture in the way, and if you don't take that into account, it's going to be very, very, very hard.
And if we go back to why I formulated the definition the way I did, is that you can't change one without the other. So let's say that you only believe that culture is behavioral patterns. Well, if we just say that we do things differently, then we've changed the culture, right? It's not quite that easy because there's something that generates those patterns that you need to understand or shift if you want if you want to create a new pattern or shift the existing one. So cultural change is, I mean, one way to put it is that behavior is emergent. It emerges from the constraints, or what's a better word for it? The preconditions of the system.
Yes, absolutely.
That's what change work should be targeting. So I think Dave Snowden puts it a lot more elegantly than I will. But one thing that we can say about complex systems is that you can't design for emergent properties. But if you want a culture to have a certain property, you need to experiment your way to it by shifting the not constraints, but affordances.
Yeah, the parameters, or I get what you're saying. But here, so now I have, let's just say, acquaintance that used to work in the clothing industry with B2B, so business to business sales, like bulk sales in the clothing and the fashion industry. And there, at that point, their ERP was essentially a shared Excel document that, of course, was not synchronized because everyone created local copies and worked in their local copies, and at some point merged the changes that they have made to their local copies. So it wasn't very well synchronized. And here, since culture is both what your cultural artifacts, like it's what you do and why you do it and what you produce that comes out of the culture. So like take this posit that this would go through an ERP transformation, as I claimed, that they would introduce some sort of enterprise level ERP system that would get rid of all of these local Excel files, which would probably improve things. But then you must also understand here, when you come at this from a transformation point of view, that you must understand that how the salespeople work with managing their customer relationships through the use of their local Excel files, that it's produced by the culture, and it's also, as you say, it's also perpetuated by the existence of these practices and the Excel files that they use as their ERP. So if you just say, let's just smooth out this and reduce all the extra work that comes from not having this in sync, that we don't know which items we have where and have promised to whom at what time. Let's just transform this and introduce an ERP system. You also realize that you will have to change the entire culture of how they go about collaborating and problem solving and dealing with customers and so on and so forth. So I think just phrasing it the way you have done here now, not only with your words, but that culture is what we do, why we do it, and also what we produce in the culture and the artifacts that we produce, and also the perpetuality of it, that one drives the other. And around and round it goes. And if we try to remove or change one part of that circle or that perpetuality, we are probably not going to get the results that we believe, at least immediately. So those were some thoughts that came to my mind.
Mm-hmm. And we kind of touched on that before in an earlier episode, or whatever we call them, that like behavior change tends to rubber band back to culture. So you try to make a change, but then the system, these Excel files were probably a way to overcome some, what did you call it, some shared difficulties in the past.
Yeah, very likely. Probably went from paper versions of it.
Yeah, so at some point, at some scale of this organization, they found this was a genius solution, and it worked probably well enough for them.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And they're kind of at the point where they're in a hardship, but they haven't identified it yet. Or at least it's not hurting enough.
No, exactly. That's the thing. It's not hurting enough. But then, to one of the questions, one of the points you made in the beginning, then, how would you measure this? How would you know you have changed something for the better or worse? Should you even try?
Should you even try? I mean, I measure a lot of things around culture. I like measuring attitudes towards certain things, because that I think is useful. So how do you feel like? Do you feel like you're effective in your work? That is not that is measuring an experience of the culture rather than measuring the culture itself, in my opinion.
Yep, I agree.
But in a sense, it is measuring culture, because the things that are said are part of the culture. So if the message is being repeated shamelessly that well, this thing sucks, and it's an accepted thing to say, then it's part of your culture. And it reveals something about the attitude towards that. So I think there is a descriptor, a popular one, that goes, culture is how we talk about ourselves. Culture is the stories that we tell about ourselves. So if you like, a lot of people, especially in like the complexity area of things, they like the narrative way into understanding systems, and that is one way of doing that. So how frequent is this story idea?
Yeah, that I've done that a lot in the past as well. I tend to spend a lot of time listening to the stories that people tell in organizations, not only about themselves, but about organizational life in general, and try to find patterns and things that recur. Yeah, it's quite powerful. But I don't think I've ever viewed it as I am measuring culture. No, I think I've just stuck to trying to understand and trying to contextualize the observable behavior. I think that's the dry explanation of what I say I do.
And when I sometimes I explicitly say that I want to measure, like, what are the stories that this system tells about itself? How do you understand itself? So one of the things I've done is try to gather the dominant narratives that the system has about itself, and then try to collect those into themes that you can work on. So in one instance, I gathered 5 positive dominant narratives and 5 negative dominant narratives that I sort of abstracted down into keywords so that they could capture more similar stories. But, I quite like that method. And to me, that is measuring an expression of culture.
Yeah, I can see that. Interesting. And here, back to the question, maybe answering it as well while I ask it. How is this useful? And I have and I have an answer myself, because it is all about behavior.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the work that I just said I do, I try to contextualize. I try to understand people's behaviors and people's action within the context that they're doing those actions. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's an incredibly important part. And as you and I both kind of point to on the direction we're leaning here, is that culture is what you do, why you do it, and the things that you produce from the things from what you do and why you do it, and the processes that you establish and set up. All of that is encapsulated. All of that is culture, and you can measure many parts of it, and it will all be useful to some degree for some reason.
I find some way of creating a story that is representative of the main frictions or the main um, strengths, let's say, of a culture. Something that makes you feel that's frustrating or bad or negative general experience of this organization, or a strong positive aspect of existing in it. So if we just for a moment say that I would like to, if I've done that work, then I would say, oh, I want you to tell. I gather people in small groups, and I ask them to tell me about the story when you felt the most stressed or confused, or whatever theme, dominant theme. And then this person tells their story, and the others, they listen. And during this story, they take notes of what is it that generates this story. So what environmental factors are they naming or not naming? And you're allowed to make them clarify a point so that you can not find a root cause, but kind of a network of contributing factors. What is it that generated this story? What is it that will make it happen again? And once you have a map of these factors, you can start maybe using some collective intelligence to find which of these factors do we actually are problematic, which of them can we work with. So then you can strategically target these factors. And so also we have a history of, let's say, for example, that one reason for an individual to feel stressed in an organization is the practice of listing the results of every individual related to, say, a quota of some kind. So if we deem that this gives rise to a negative experience of the culture, then we might be inclined to not have that practice in place. So that would be a reason to change something that creates an experience of the culture that will drive behavior further down the line.
Mm.
But then I can't predict the exact down the line changes of that, but we can say that we think that fewer people will feel stressed if we remove this factor.
Mm. No, absolutely, and I think that's the best you can expect. You can't control and you can't dictate people's behavior. The behavior has to be emergent. And one of the beliefs I have is that this practice sounds incredibly powerful for the main reason that you are helping people reflect on their experiences, and you're doing that collectively, which is another aspect that is incredibly powerful. So I think this is a really good idea, because most of the times people don't take the time to reflect on their organizational experiences. They just go to work, do their work, and then go home.
Is that's the what we should be titling ourselves in the future? OX designers.
Organizational experience designers.
Yeah.
Yeah, that might be something. And this also ties into my view on leadership as well. I see leadership as the main responsibility to help people do this, to help their employees or the people around them reflect on their experiences that they're having. Essentially, reflect on the culture, why they're doing what they're doing, and for what outcome they are expecting to have. So I think I'm pretty happy with this point, because I kind of, as I said in the beginning, I agreed with your early statement. You can't measure culture, but then on the other hand, you can measure a lot of things that make up culture, and measuring those things, those indicators, are most of the times very useful. So I think I'm happy with that. So you can't measure culture as one metric, but you can measure a lot of things that make up culture, and measuring those things will give you valuable insights.
But we're in luck though, because there is a king of metrics when it comes to culture.
Oh,
I don't know.
please.
I don't know
Do
if you've
share.
heard of it, but it's called ENPS. Do you know what it is?
Yes. It's a employee net promoter score, right? Or employer net promoter score. Yeah, sure.
So it's a voluntary response to the question of how likely on a scale of 0 to 10 are you to recommend this workplace to a friend of yours or another person.
Which is a good question for sure.
It's a useful thing to know, but the way it's measured usually is kind of poor. You get this twice a yearly metric of an incredibly lagging metric. So I was at a media streaming organization once, and at one point they had a bit of a scandal on one of their shows. That was like a very problematic episode, and an interesting thing about this is that it had an impact on the ENPS. I mean, it was not like the organization. It was external production company that created this, and it was made available through this streaming service, and yet it had an impact on the ENPS.
Yeah.
So it's a very highly abstract aggregate of a lot of factors.
Yeah, fascinating.
So it's not my favorite metric, let's say.
No, me neither, as you might have guessed. But I've been in quite a few organizations where this has been used to some extent, or at least been measured twice a year, but never used for anything useful or anything valuable.
Since we're talking about measuring and culture, HR is usually in the habit of doing this at least once a year, hopefully a couple of more times a year, where they sent out a survey, and then you rank a series of statements on a scale from, I don't know, 0 to 10 or something like that. Do you have any? How do you feel about those in general? They're definitely an attempt to measure culture.
Yes, they are. I have, in my experience, I have never. I think the challenge or the issue I have with it is that it's never clear what those measures or those surveys or those metrics, what they're going to be used for. And you don't know what happens once the survey is done and the result is concluded, except that something is sent out and you see the result, but then you don't know what was the point of this. I was in one large organization, however, that really tried to work actively with this. And the interesting history behind that was there was one very dedicated person in one of the countries in one of the locations where one person actively worked with that exact survey and actively worked with improving and responding to the results and acting accordingly. And over a few years' time, I think like 3 years' time, showed that if you actually surprise, if you actually listen to your employees and do what they want and respond to the things that they like request, you will get a pretty good working environment. Who would have thought? But this person actively showed, by using the data and the info that we get from this survey, you can actively make a very good work environment. But it was a lot of hard work from this one person that really had to push this, and then it was rolled out to the whole company, tens of thousands of employees. So that to some degree they actually listened, but then I don't think it went much further than that, because you had a very passionate leader who really wanted to do things for their employees, and then HR just rolls this out as a practice across the whole organization as a thing that leaders or managers now must do. So it's kind of, but they at least attempted.
Mm-hmm.
And ENPS was the main overarching metric in this survey as well, and then a lot of other bullet points or questions underneath.
It's a good story. Does and you hinted on it being rolled out by HR.
Yes.
How did that manifest into something?
When I was at this organization, it was just in the beginning when this global rollout was happening. And then I was there for a couple of quarters where this was followed up upon. And there were working groups created around certain problem areas or certain areas that was deemed to require a bit more focus. But it was very difficult to see during my time, I didn't really see much result from that work, other than it was a lot of buzz and a lot of people running around. But at this point, today, if they continued, then today I think they would be a much better off than they were. But I also know from sources that they have gone through a transformation or two since then. So those practices might not still be there.
Yeah, nothing quite to squash culture like transformations.
Exactly. No, but I think this goes back to the core of the core of, like, should you measure culture, and if so, what are you measuring? To me, it goes back to the idea: why do you want to measure this? And what can you measure, and for what purpose, and for what end goal? And here it comes down to people in an organization they are in the organization to achieve certain goals, to help the organization achieve certain goals. And organizational behavior, individual behavior is what's going to get you there. And you can't dictate behavior. You can only create the right circumstances for positive or beneficial behaviors to occur. But then first and foremost, you need to understand, what are those behaviors? Which behaviors do we want more of, and which do we want less of? And you have to have that understanding in the organization. And only then can you start to tweak the parameters that are under your control to see what happens. And then it's good to measure certain things. If you have certain behaviors or certain outcomes that you know are beneficial, then measure those. And when it comes to behaviors, the best way that I know is to observe. You need to observe people doing the work in the right context. And if you do that, and then you gather that, and you generate insights from that somehow, and then you reflect on it, then that's incredibly powerful. So maybe conclusion from my side of where I ended up is measuring culture, measuring Cultural components, yes, you can do that. You should absolutely do that. And you should also understand that culture is what people do, why people do it, and what people produce, and how they come to agreements and create processes around what they do and why they do things. All of that is culture. And you can't change one component and expect a completely different result. And as you said, behavior will kind of snap back to the culture. So you need to gently change the parameters and create, as I just said, create the right circumstances for the behaviors that you want to see. And you don't know if you tweak one parameter that you will see a change in the right direction. This is where you have to try. So this is kind of my summary of what we have just talked about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's always a kind of a multi-pronged attack, so to speak.
Yeah. Do you have any concluding thoughts or insights or anything new that came to you?
Not necessarily. Nothing that comes to mind immediately.
Not necessarily. But then let me, one of the first things I said was culture is the conversation that happens at the coffee machine.
Oh, yeah.
But with that, and since now I have also arrived at culture, that culture is what you do, why you do it, and the artifacts around you and the artifacts that you create and also have in the office, that the conversations around the coffee machine is probably also influenced heavily by the type of coffee machine and the coffee you have.
That's right.
I was at one organization where they had the standard automatic one press and you get a coffee. But then there were some very, let's say, passionate engineers that brought their own coffee machine. The proper one with where you grind your coffee beans and you create your own espresso, and you had to have the proper driver's license to use that machine, because I have one at home as well, and it's not just plug and play. You just go. You have to have some feel for it and know the steps and some parameters that are quite important when creating a good coffee. And one machine is definitely not exact like the next one. So that will also influence the culture and the conversations that happen around the coffee machine, for sure. So that was just yeah. That was also an interesting thought that came to me. And last example on the coffee here, I was at another organization I worked with that they had an in-house cafeteria, like an in-office professional barista. Like they had a staffed cafe inside the office that was purely for the office workers. So you could just go and get a like professional barista coffee for free whenever you wanted.
Oh, for free even?
Yeah. They subsidized. I believe they paid roughly. I think the subsidized was roughly €1,000 per employee per month or something like that. So they spent a lot of money on having that coffee place. Also, they sold some subsidized food as well. So it was food and free coffee from a professional barista. I think they worked early morning till before lunch or something.
I imagine they had a lot to do.
They had a lot to do, yeah. The office was 120 people or something.
Now that you mentioned, I was also at the place that had an in-house barista, but it was not entirely subsidized. It was definitely cheaper than getting it on the town, and very good. But I imagine that's how they managed the flow problem there.
Exactly. So one tip from us is, if you want to influence culture positively, get an in-house or in-office professional barista. That's the number one tip.
Complexity Cogitators approve.
Absolutely. Cool. Marco, it was lovely talking to you. I feel like we have squeezed this wet rag that is culture for now.
For now, it's a vast topic. There's a lot more to say, but
it will come back. It will come back.
I imagine it will.
But for now, thank you.
Thank you.